What's going on, everybody? I'm reviewing all 7 of Quentin Tarantino's films in preparation for his brand new film coming out on January 8th, The Hateful Eight. And here we are, folks. This is his final film, his most recent film that he's directed before the release of The Hateful Eight, Django Unchained. So Django Unchained came out in 2012, and it's an American spaghetti western film, and it's set in the Deep South during the antebellum era. So Django is played by Jamie Foxx, he's a black slave, and Dr. King Schultz is played by Christoph Waltz. Christoph Waltz's character, Dr. King Schultz, he's a bounty hunter who poses as a dentist, and he basically comes across Django, and they basically create an exchange between each other. Schultz promises to teach Django bounty hunting and also to find his wife, Broomhilda, who's actually stuck on a slave plantation, while Django can actually help Dr. King Schultz with his bounty hunting expenditures. So I mean, with all of that said, it takes about 40 minutes for this movie to really get into the plot and the point of it. However, it does a good job of setting up the relationship between Schultz and Django. Now, with the backstory already set up, let's go ahead and get right into the performances and the technicality and what I think about this movie overall. So Django Unchained, wow, this movie, I feel a lot about this movie. There are so many emotions that come to mind when thinking about this film, and I really can't pinpoint just one emotion or feeling when I watch this movie, because there's so many emotions. It's a roller coaster, really. So let's start off with the performances. As always, Quentin Tarantino employs an incredible cast, and this just may be one of his best ever. In this movie alone, you have Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kerry Washington, Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, those are just heavy hitters. I thought Jamie Foxx did an incredible job in this role as Django. I mean, he was really an interesting character, you know, from being a slave to becoming like a bounty hunter in a sense, and then also, you know, going on this mission to free his wife from the slave plantation known as Candyland from Calvin Candie. I mean, he was really visceral. Christoph Waltz's Dr. King Schultz was extremely enjoyable, although this role that Christoph Waltz had was not as good as Hans Landa from the Inglourious Basterds. It's still a very good role. This side, he was on the good side. Technically the good side, if you want to say good side. I mean, there's really no good sides when you're talking about this type of film, but he was on the protagonist side, and I thought he was very enjoyable in his role. He had a lot of humorous dialogue. I thought his character was very witty and clever as always. Christoph Waltz is just brilliant in whatever he played. But honestly, the two show stealers in this movie, Samuel L. Jackson and Leonardo DiCaprio, I mean, good grief. Those two, as far as portraying characters and fulfilling their roles and living their roles, I mean, I couldn't have believed them more. Samuel L. Jackson, he made me hate him. Like, he really made me hate him for just the way he portrayed the character, and just like how sneaky and conniving and intimidating he was. Like, because he was really Calvin Candie's right-hand man, you know, on this slave plantation. Like, he was just extremely irritating the entire movie because he was such a suck up, he was such a kiss ass, and you just really believed that he was just a puppet for Calvin Candie. And then you're talking about Leonardo DiCaprio, who I think for the first time in his career played a villain in a movie, and my goodness, he was just so sinister in this movie as Calvin Candie, being the head of a plantation, being the #1 guy, you know, the white man owning slaves. Like, evil already in that right, but even more evil in his approach. The thing about his character is that he was so intelligent. It took a lot to outsmart him. The good thing about this movie is that, you know, Django's character finds a way to outsmart him, but Calvin Candie, just being that embodiment of a slave owner, being that archetype of a slave owner during this era, during the Deep South antebellum era, it was approaching the Civil War. Like, his character was so sinister and so unforgiving, and you just really believed that this man was evil, and he had evil intentions, and he cared nothing about but himself and his capital and his wealth. And like I said, when I'm talking about this movie, there are so many emotions. I mean, it is his most violent film ever. Django Unchained is certainly his most violent film thus far, and that's not just because of the violence that he puts in the film, but just because of the fact that it takes place around the time of slavery and the things that happen. There's a torture scene, you know, with some dogs, and there's a Mandingo fight that takes place. These are very horrific and heinous things that actually happen. This film is his most violent, but it's probably because it's the most realistic violence and the most accurate violence that he's portrayed in any of his films thus far. But you know, Django, this film is sweeping. It's really an epic film in so many ways. I think it's certainly his longest film. It's really just shy of 3 hours. And it really kind of takes that long because of the amount of depth that these characters carry throughout the entire time. Like I said, there's many different story arcs that occur within it, but the main plot is Django trying to, you know, win the freedom of his wife Brunhilde, played by Kerry Washington. But just the way that it's carried out and the action that exists throughout this film, it's bold and it's brilliant and it's really unapologetic in a lot of ways. Now, can Django be seen as a problematic film? Absolutely. I cannot even sit here and deny that, and I can't sit here and ignore it. I think there's some problematic things about this movie, and you know, it's really interesting that a white director decided to embark on this type of film and to kind of turn slavery into a spaghetti western. Slavery is not a spaghetti western in any regard, and I mean, if you're going to take this topic and put it on the film, you have to be very, very critical and crucial of the way you do it. And a lot of people would argue that, you know, he did the same thing with Inglourious Basterds and he made it humorous, but you know, at the same time, like neither of those instances, you know, when you're talking about World War II, Holocaust, Nazi Germany, or slavery, neither one of those things can be taken, you know, lightly or can be laughed at. And I hate to talk so much about it, but you have to really break down this film for everything that it's worth. And there's so many different layers and elements to it, and just the whole saga that exists within it. The story of Django Freeman as he attempts to win his freedom for not only himself but his wife, and then also the encounters with Calvin Candie and the sinister character that he plays, and then Stephen, you know, Samuel L. Jackson's character, just the embodiment of that. I mean, there's really so many messages that kind of exist without this film. I will say one of the shining parts of it is the soundtrack. It's an incredible soundtrack. Quentin Tarantino is known for putting some incredible music in his films, and he does it again with this. He also has some original music that we haven't heard of before. A lot of original music, actually, from the likes of John Legend, from the likes of RZA. There's a lot of really cool original music that's put throughout this film to really heighten the sense of it, the style of it. But I have to put Django as one of Quentin Tarantino's best films, certainly. It could really be argued as his second or third best film. I think his best film is certainly still Inglourious Basterds, but it can really fight that spot, you know, from Pulp Fiction. Like I said, Pulp Fiction is certainly his most revolutionary and influential film, but when we're talking about technicality and what might be his best film, while Inglourious Basterds is at the top, Django can be easily slipped into that 2 or 3 spot as far as his best films that he's done. So when you're looking at Django, just, you know, be aware that this is going to take, you know, a lot to get through. It's going to make you feel a lot of ways, and just even watching this movie, I was uncomfortable a lot because there was just this perverted sense, you know, of just wealth and power and dominance that existed throughout the whole film. Like, I could never watch it, you know, the same way twice, just because of, you know, the different lens that I look at it from now. And you have to really look at it through a critical lens, and a lot of scholars have looked at this film, and it can really be dissected in a lot of different ways. I think it's a good discussion point to really sit down, and when you're talking about a period of history and how that's portrayed in Hollywood, this is certainly at the top of the list at those films that can be dissected. I mean, it's just kind of hard to believe that something like this, you know, actually happened in human history, that this occurred to humanity. This is a human issue and a human thing that actually transpired over hundreds of years. So for this to be depicted on film is certainly a sensitive topic as well, and I think that, like I said, you really have to approach this film with a disclaimer, and you have to be warned that it's tough to swallow, it's tough to really indulge in, and it's a lot to consume. But just be warned when you're consuming it. It can also provide as a learning opportunity as well. But overall, you know, when I'm talking about Django Unchained, like I said, this is definitely one of Quentin Tarantino's best films. It's definitely laced with a lot. It probably has more layers than any other Quentin Tarantino movie, and it probably has more hard-hitting, emotional characters than any other Quentin Tarantino movie. And for that, and for the fact that it created a ton of conversation and discussion, this movie is getting a 9.5 out of 10 for me, certainly. Alright folks, that's all I got for my review of Django Unchained. As always, follow me on social media, JRW Creator, on Twitter and Instagram. And then go check out my website, jordanrwilliams.com. And if you've been following me this entire time, well, this is it for Quentin Tarantino's filmography. These are all of his movies that he's directed. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, he's one of my favorite directors, and I am extremely excited about his brand new film coming out on January 8th, The Hateful Eight. Make sure you go check it out in theaters, and of course, make sure you check out my review. I'll see y'all next time.